Let's talk about the Layers palette, a very important and powerful tool for organizing and helping you to work uh, more efficiently in working with your files. Think of the Layers palette as like a deck of cards, and if the deck of cards was actually all pieces of acetate, or each card was clear, uh, and you have different elements on different cards, you could change the stacking order by shuffling the cards and moving things that are in the front towards the back. And you can also use this process to move things from one layer or from one card to another card. And it's a very important way of working efficiently, I guess is the best way to say it. So here we go. Very powerful tool. First, we have the Layers palette, so bring that up if you don't already have it in front of you. And we always start automatically with one layer. Um, and then we can modify those layers, we can add things to those layers, we can create new layers. So here are the basic tools. First off, we have each layer listed here, and we can name the layers or rename them by simply clicking on the word in the palette, and that brings up what we call the layer options. And here I can rename it or do whatever I want. And the idea is to put things on different layers in a logical manner, and to name those layers in a logical manner so that you know what the heck is going on when you're working with your files, which can start to get really complex. And you have an awful lot of pieces, parts, and we want to isolate them, and we want to lock them, and do a variety of things that let us work more efficiently. Also, while I'm here, notice that there's a color coding. Every time you create a new layer, it's automatically color coded. I usually let the computer choose the colors. The point is that you'll see as we move on, in this case, things are on this layer are color coded in blue, and so when we see them highlighted, that is the same color associated with that layer. And so it's another visual way of keeping things organized and knowing where things are. So I can say OK, and we can always go back to that. You can do that partly from this little options button in the corner of our palette. We always have the little options button here, and one of the things that we have here is options, and it'll bring us right back to this same spot. But double clicking is a little bit quicker. Well, what we have is first we have over here in the left, you see the little eyeball. The eyeball lets us turn things on and off. Notice that when I uncheck it or unclick it, you see that piece of type disappears. It's still there, but we simply push it out of sight so that it doesn't get in our way if we want to get to something behind it. So that's very useful and efficient. Another thing that we often want to do is we may want to lock an element. We've been learning that generally when we want to select things, you click and drag. Well, when you do that, everything that's not locked down is going to become activated, like this type as well as the heart. And so by locking some of the elements, we can have them still visible, but we can't accidentally move them or activate them or more or less have them get in our way. And so in this little box next to the eyeball, we can click and lock that element. And now, even if we want to, we cannot select it or activate it. I can still select and activate these things on a different layer, but these words cannot be activated because that layer is locked. Okay? Then another aspect to layers is that every single individual element on a layer shows up as what we call a sublayer. You can see that they are indented, and I got to those by clicking on the little gray triangle and turning it, and then you see all of the individual pieces, parts on that layer. And each of them can be individually locked or made visible or invisible, and so you have that same control. Okay? Then we have at the bottom of our layers palette a couple of important tools. When we want to create a blank layer to work on, or to duplicate a layer and everything that's on that layer, we can drag it down to this little icon right here at the bottom of the layers palette, that little page icon, and it duplicated that entire layer and everything that is on that layer. Okay? So by dragging an existing layer down on top of that, it will duplicate it. We can also discard a layer by clicking and dragging it down to the little trash can and discard it. Okay? So we can do a number of different tasks like that. We also can, I mentioned it, create a blank new layer by simply clicking the page icon. Here we are, and we create a new blank layer. Okay? So we can either duplicate a layer or we can create a blank layer. All right, and then what we have is this issue of changing the stacking order of things. I started out talking about how, like a deck of cards, we can do that, and we can do that very easily. Notice that this type is in front of the heart. Okay? If I want to reverse that, all I need to do is come over here and click on one of these layers and drag it to a different position, and there you see the change. The deal is that the things at the top of the list are in the front, and the things down towards the bottom or in the back, on the bottom, are in the back. And so that's sort of the stacking order of your cards. And so by simply clicking and dragging these to rearrange them, putting them above and below each other, we can change the stacking order. And that applies to either a full layer, or we can do the very same thing with our sublayers as well. Change the stacking order by simply clicking an element and dragging it up to a new position and then letting go. The one other area that sometimes comes in handy is moving an element from one layer to another layer. So the way we would do that is, let's say this piece of type right here. I'll click on it to activate it, and a couple of things. One is that I want to point out, go down here and get this. As a matter of fact, this piece of type is all the way down here in the bottom. So I'm going to drag it and move it up higher in my list of sublayers. And again, we can do that very easily. So by simply dragging it, I'm changing the stacking order of those elements. Well, I indicated that what I wanted to do here was move this word from this layer that it's on currently to a new layer, a different layer. And so all I need to do is, once again, click and drag it, and I'll take it up to this new layer 3 and just drop it. And now it's on that layer. I know that by just checking the little eyeball. And I mentioned to you that when you select it, it's color coded. See, now this is green to coincide with this layer, which is green.